Welcome to our Understanding Transitions seminar. I want to thank you for tuning in. This is the first time that it's being held as an online seminar, of course, due to our COVID restrictions. I'm just going to back that up. Sorry, we'll leave it there. Yeah, when I've done this as a live seminar, we would normally allow some opportunities for interaction, and so we would be doing some feedback and give and take on the spot, but we're not able to do that, of course, because of our COVID restrictions. So I'm just going to do this seminar in this recorded fashion, and then around 3 o'clock I'm going to host a Zoom call where you can call in and join me on Zoom, and we can have a question and answer time and discuss anything from the seminar that you'd like to discuss. So the invitation, by the way, to that Zoom should be in your weekly update, so check there. If you don't have that, just email me at bfreynolds21@gmail.com. I'll give you that again at the end of the seminar today. So let's begin our time together at a word of prayer, shall we? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this subject of transitioning, and as we embark on this transitional process, I pray that this seminar will help everyone to have a little bit of a clearer picture on what's involved at the different stages, and so that we can work together toward the end of fulfilling your purposes for us. And we pray these things as we seek your grace and instruction in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I'd like to begin by talking about the purpose of the seminar. And maybe I'll hit that one. As you can see on the screen, the purpose of the seminar is to help to clarify what I mean by a church transition, and to prepare you for what's coming in the months and possibly year or two ahead. I'm pretty sure that very few of you have been through this experience. In my 11 years of transitioning experience, I've recognized that people understandably come with a variety of expectations, meaning that they hope this will happen, or they think this will happen, or they want this to happen. And some of those may be valid, but some may not, and it doesn't mean they're right or wrong expectations. It's just not the way I've planned it or the way we're going to work it out. So in the subject of expectations, I do remind you that next month on February 28th, we'll have a second seminar called Managing Our Expectations, and we'll talk even more then about how we can do a good job of managing our expectations. So some have asked me, why am I a transitionist? Or in this case, why am I a transitional pastor? The question often comes up, why don't I just sign on to a church and become their pastor? And I have pastored 3 Christian Missionary Alliance churches for 25 years, between pastoring in St. Catharines, Ontario, Regina, Saskatchewan, and Burlington, Ontario. So it's a fair question. It's a very good question. It's one my family would ask me, and friends and churches. And my answer is simply this: that's just not me. After serving in the capacity of the lead pastor in those churches between 1985 and 2010, I came to the realization that my skill set is really best suited to transitioning. Now you might say, well, how is that? Like, what did you see that made you think that? So let me explain by giving you the roles of a transitionist. There's actually 4 roles that I see, and then I'll talk about how I see myself fitting in there. In this case, I'm a transitionist, of course, working with churches, so a transitional pastor. The 4 roles that I see in terms of being a transitional pastor, first of all, being a consultant. And as a consultant, I'm a third party who comes from outside your system, We'll talk more about systems in this and in a future seminar as well. But I also remain outside. Even though I'm hired by the church, I still seek to stay out of the system and share my insights and help the leadership of the organization, and in this case the church, with making decisions. So they're not my decisions, but I do try to help in making decisions by giving the options and talking through the benefit and or lack of benefit of any options. The second area is being a facilitator, and by that I mean a person who doesn't necessarily do the work, but helps others to get up to speed and do the work. So facilitating in that sense, I'm here to work alongside, and you'll see there'll be a couple of teams or committees that I'll facilitate. I won't be part of the decision-making process, but I'll facilitate those teams so we stay on process, on course, don't get dragged off in another direction. The third area that you're probably even more familiar with is me being a teacher and trainer. And in that, just as with this seminar, I'm helping the church understand certain concepts and helping you put them into practice. So teaching with information and explanation, but then putting them into practice through example, modeling, training, things like that. And finally, in the role as pastor, I'm functioning as the one of the shepherds with the elders board, leader of the church in conjunction with both the elders and staff. And so in my capacity as transitional pastor, I'm serving under the leadership of the Central Canadian District and working in cooperation with them in leading this church. Now, I'd like to explain this in terms of my shape. And when I use shape, as you can see on the screen, SHAPE stands for spiritual gifts, heart, meaning that my passion or our passion in ministry, abilities, personality, and E is both education and experience. And I didn't invent that. It comes from Rick Warren and his purpose-driven church model, but I'm happy to incorporate it. I find it as a useful acrostic and just a helpful thing. We've always worked with spiritual gifts, but it seems that there's more than spiritual gifts when we're looking for where a person fits in their role or ministry. So why don't we just look at my example? What is my shape? My spiritual gifts are in teaching and leadership, not as much in pastoral care. Now that doesn't mean I don't do pastoral care. It just means that that's not where my gifting lies. That's not as great a strength. I do it because it comes in the role, but I don't do it as much. And with my limited time in being a pastoral or a transitional pastor, 20, 25, or 30 hours, with limited time, there's much less pastoral care, which is fine with me because what I consider more important is congregational care and encouraging the congregation to find care through the elders, through small groups, and through other media of care within the church family. So that's fine with me. My heart passion is to help churches who are stuck, churches who are plateaued, declining, not moving forward, and we'll see what that looks like in a moment. My abilities are in the area of problem solving, clarifying, and explaining. So I've done my own personal testing in the past to determine what I'm good at doing, and apparently what was discovered is that I'm good at clarifying things or explaining things and helping people problem solve. Again, not necessarily by coming up with all the answers, but working with people to help them to do that. My personality type is that I am a people-oriented person. I like to work with people. I love people, but I'm not a long-term person. I am a creative person, but I get bored with sameness and need new challenges. And so I'm pretty well suited to a shorter term in terms of doing this, not the long term. Even though I was a long-term pastor for 15 years in a church, I really believe I'm better suited to short term. And finally, my experience in education, both through practical or theological training and academic training at Bible college and seminary level, and all of the other opportunities I've had for education outside of that. And quite honestly, I've made all the mistakes in ministry, and I'm free to admit it. So when I come to helping staff and elders and church teams in areas, I'm happy to share all the mistakes and difficulties I've had and humbly admit that I'm not perfect and I had to work through and learn the hard way, and that's often how we learn the best. So I am unashamedly a transitionist. Though I do, as I say, function in the church as a pastor, I don't normally or do what a lead pastor normally does, meaning I don't make some of those decisions or most of those decisions, but I work with the board so that together we make those decisions. I work part-time, and part of the reason for that is that the church is not going to grow dependent on me and forces you to do more of the work. I'm happy to delegate, and I think that's what pastors should always be doing, is training, modeling, teaching, but delegating, handing off ministry, not holding on to it. So I think with that, and as I've said, the decision-making function being more in your hands, as I've said to each church that I've transitioned, I let you make the decisions because I never want you to come back to me and say, well, you said this. And I say, no, I'll give you the options. We'll look at the possibilities, but ultimately it's your decision. What can we say about transitional ministry? It's a fairly recent innovation. It's based in the concept of change management. It's an area of leadership and management that has recently developed. So several years ago, my wife Sandy went back to university and earned her Master of Arts in Leadership Development. She is a well-trained person in leadership development and has worked in that field and writes in that field and has taught me a lot. And our conversations, we speak the same language, and it's very helpful for me. Let me just go back and share what I said in one of my first messages. What is a transition? It's a recognition that something is ending. And from that ending, which becomes our beginning, we begin with the end, we're going to move forward into something else. So transitioning is a recent area of study, if I can consider 40 years recent, but it's still pretty recent academically. William Bridges, in his 1980 book, and you'll see it on the screen, Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes. He gives us in that book, as he says on the cover, strategies for coping with the difficult, painful, and confusing times in our lives. And that's exactly what a transition is. We move from the ending, and you see that in the blue, the dark blue, the time of losing or letting go, and we move into the neutral zone. We don't move right to the new beginning. There's a period in between. It's a time of discovery. It's a time of, as we'll see, diagnosing and understanding, of discerning and making some decisions so we can have a new beginning, so we can go forward with confidence. Now, this isn't a new thing. I mean, this has happened throughout history, but it was a recognition of the way things work and how to make the best use of this transitional time. Now, some people have asked, well, is there a difference between change and transition? And according to Bridges, change refers to a specific event. So we need to recognize that there's a specific event. I'll bring that. Oh, I think we need that. I've lost my pictures here. Here we go. Just have to tell Alex, I lost my pictures on this, so you're going to have to do it. I need the, yeah, that's great, thanks. I lost it on here. Trying to be technical, but I pushed the wrong button. So is there a difference? Well, according to Bridges, change refers to a specific event, such as a new job, becoming a parent, moving. So if I were to ask you to write a timeline of your life, you could pretty well just kind of put the high points or the events in your life, your education, your training, your job, your marriage, Transition isn't so linear or concrete. Instead, it's the process. It's the whole process going in response to that change or changes. And one could argue that transition is just a whole time period, but really it's not just a period of time, it's a constellation of thoughts, emotions, and actions. So here's the quote, and you see it on the screen from Bridges. And again, I think it just sums it up. Transition is psychological. Change is situational. It's not events, but rather the inner reorientation and self-redefinition that you have to go through in order to incorporate those changes into your life. So situationally, we make changes, we make actions, but psychologically, emotionally, internally, we transition. Some people like the word transformation better. That's a great biblical word. That's a great Romans 12 word. So yeah, good word too. For churches, the common idea previously was that pastors who came in this period were called interim pastors. And unfortunately, the idea of interim just sort of came across as, well, they're taking up space, they're keeping the pulpit warm until the next pastor comes in. But a change came in the late 1900s, sorry, I'm getting my time wrong, the early 2000s, with a friend of ours, Cam Taylor, and his book, Between Pastors. Can we get that one up on the screen? Yeah, that's great. There's Cam's excellent book. Cam was working through Outreach Canada, and now he runs the Transitional Leadership Network. And so keep in touch with him regularly. But this excellent book that Cam and Alan Simpson wrote, Between Pastors, Seizing the Opportunity, through Outreach Canada and now through his new organization, trains transitional pastors to make the most of the opportunity between pastors. And so our denomination has always lined up very closely with CAM and originally with Outreach Canada, and especially to understand how to make the best use of this time. Our district, the Central Canadian District, and I believe the Pacific District were sort of the ones that sort of led the charge there. And it's been exciting to be a part of it here in Ontario. Okay, so that's enough of an introduction. Now I just want to take you to dive in and look at the transition process. And every transitionist sort of has their own pattern or process. I mean, Cam recommends one in there, and every other writer I know has a variation on the theme. I want to give you my process and explain why I use it as I go through it as well. So there, I've probably shown you this diagram before, the 5-part process, starting with D, just, as my little memory aid to everything starts with D, discovery, and that's where we are now in the discovery area phase. Diagnosis, discernment, decisions, and then ultimately direction forward. On that illustration on the screen, everything looks separate, but they really overlap. So, I mean, it's just an illustration, and it's not meant to be hard and fast, but it's just that idea that there's 5 phases. They will overlap, but at any time during the process, I can pretty well tell you this is where we are. And after a while, you'll get pretty used to knowing where we are as well. So let's unpack the 5 phases, shall we? The first phase is discovery, and that's where we are now, the initiation period. This is the time when I get to know people, I get to know your culture, I get to know your community, I get up to know some background, some history, some key events, perhaps some former pastors. I talked to some former pastors. I've known some of your former pastors, actually. This is probably one of the first churches that I kind of knew former pastors. So the district, in some cases, does, as I'm working with the Christian Missionary Alliance, does what's called a church health assessment, and they will supply that. They will do a survey with you and provide that. You had one done 7 years ago. The district does not have a person to do that right now. They've had to cut back on staff and in the COVID pandemic. So that's fine. We're doing without it, but what we're doing is leaning more heavily on the listening post, which is fine by me, because that's where I get the bulk of my information as well. I've met with some of you, but I certainly want to meet with more of you. When I'm working in normal times, I don't know when normal times will return, but when I work in normal times, I would probably be doing more groups, meeting with a small group, meeting with inviting groups to the church or people just to come together at the church and talk. And it's really good then because you all get to hear one another. Right now we're doing, with Zoom calls, we're doing more individuals, couples, and small settings. And I'm happy to do it whatever way you're comfortable with. But I would like to speak with you. If you would like to speak with me, reach out to me through email, as I said. And but I will, if I don't hear from you, I hope to reach out to you as well. At the end of that, I will write a listening report, present it to the elders, and then with their approval, present it to the church family. So yeah, you will hear that report. Then it will go to the transition team that you'll hear about as well. It's also a time of ending and grieving in the sense that, you know, some of you are close to the former pastor and friends with that person, or with some other people that may have left or whatever. In some cases, there may be a grieving over something's gone wrong, and we're grieving over that. So my objective during the discovery time is really to take the time to listen, to learn, and try to understand where are you and how did you get here? And that'll lead to the second phase, which, as I said, is called diagnosis. So there I work with the elders, and if need be the district, to ascertain, well, what condition is the church in? And there needs to be that understanding in some way, shape, or form of how we got here. So we need a realistic, honest appraisal of the strengths and weaknesses of the church. And I often say it's the brutal truth, that we're just admitting this is what we do well, and this is what we need to improve. And so that analysis comes from the listening posts. We want to look at two key factors in the diagnosis phase. The first one is the church life cycle, and the second one, our church system. So let's look at each of those. The church life cycle. Oh, there's yeah, we're kind of beyond all that. Okay. There we are. Now we've caught up. There you go. So where are we on the church life cycle? Every church or organization is subject to this cycle. So you see it goes from new church to solvent, healthy church, and then it sort of crests over the hill and becomes a declining church and ultimately a dying church. And the reality of this is, and it's been proven in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of examples that have been tested over the last 50 years in church health studies, you can't go backwards. You can't go back up the hill. You can only go up again. So you've crested over the hill and you're going down, And the way to break out of that is to start going up again, have a new incline, to go from your decline to your incline. So let's look at the next slide and we'll see how that works even a little bit better. You see that there's the three parts. There's the incline, and the characteristics of the incline are that the church is risk-taking and evangelistic and transformational. So there's that enthusiasm and that energy. But then it goes into the recline. And the recline is when things like facilities start to take over, and programs and finances, they become the focus. And then with the decline, we see it's focusing on survival and preservation, and in many cases just hanging on. The writing at the bottom, I don't know if you can read that clearly, but the significance of the motivation. On one side, it's satisfying, but on the other side, it's being safe, safety. Are we finding satisfaction, or are we just being safe? And so there's a reality, there's a realization that every church goes through this. And the danger is, if you want to get out of a decline, to just settle for another recline. And unfortunately, some churches do that. They want to break out of the decline, but they get into that plateau or that recline where the numbers stay steady and everything stays steady, but nothing's really happening. There's no impact really on people's lives and the community, and you'll just go back into decline because you're not making any impact. One of the former presidents of the Christian Mission Alliance used to have that motto, maximum impact for God. I'm wondering how many of you ever heard that. Making a maximum impact for God. Well, you're in a decline or a recline, you're not doing that. The only way you're doing that is in an incline. But being in an incline is going to take some real change. So that's one of the areas we're going to look at. The second area is church systems. And when I say church systems, and I know this is like, what's that illustration? Well, we're not going to go into it in detail right now, so we will have a seminar on this, a separate seminar in a couple of months, maybe 3. I think it might be April, but anyway. But when I say church systems, what I'm talking about is how we do church. What's our DNA? What's our system? What are our values? And in here, as we look at the elements of the system, we say, what is and isn't functioning well in our church? So, while not going into detail, I will say that it all focuses ultimately on our mission or our objective. And that's why when we see the transition team, they'll be focused on the mission, the vision, and the values, which are all up there. And they'll be using this illustration, and they'll be thinking systems when they're working. They'll address that, and they'll be focused on that, and they will make a report to the elders and to you as well. So again, all of this will be fed back to you. The work that any of these teams or committees do, we want to be transparent. We want to be communicators. We want to have a good system that gets this material out. But we do want to ask you to be patient because it takes time. I do also want to say in the midst of this, talking about systems, and my understanding, I've worked as a pastor in church doing counseling through family systems. I've also studied business systems and different organizational systems. And I've kind of pooled it into my understanding of what helps the most working here. But one simple thing that might help you to understand this is we in our lives normally address things as situations. We deal primarily situationally. So in any situation in your family or in your school or in your work or in the church, You want to, if a situation seems to not be working, you want to fix that situation, and that's normal. But usually behind that situation is a system wherein even if you fix that situation, it's going to pop up somewhere else. So you fix the situation, but oh, now it's gone wrong over here, or oh, it's gone wrong over here. And I certainly know from my counseling experience that, just trying to fix a situation doesn't really fix anything because we haven't addressed the system. And so that's what we're going to look at, the whole system, as we seek to transition the church. Let's move on to the third phase. And the third phase is what I call discernment. Alice Mann has a very helpful book, not asking you to read it, but it helped me, and it was called Can Our Church Live? And Alice did a wonderful job. She's an expert in church health and growth, and she looked at churches and saw over and over the churches said, yes, we need to change, just don't touch my thing. Everybody says, yeah, we need change, but don't touch my area. Don't touch me, don't touch my area. But yeah, we need change. And she asks us in that book to answer the questions, who are we? That's an identity question. Why are we here? How did we get here? And who's my neighbor? Like, why are we here? Why are we in this area in this time? Transitions are always focusing on 4 areas of renewal. And I've mentioned this before, I think, in a sermon back in December, and I just would reiterate again that those 4 areas are the areas that I'll be touching on in sermons, especially with small group material, like we're seeing in the Connecting series, as well as working with the teams. Some of those areas will be addressed by those teams. So those 4 areas, the area of spiritual renewal, in which we're developing trust in God and personal spiritual formation. We're doing the series right now on Portraits of Persistent Faith. We'll be doing another series later on called When God Calls, and other messages and series. The relational area, that purple area in there, developing love for one another and healing relationships and peacemaking. Connecting is the first series, and later on we'll be doing one on peacemaking based on Ken Sande's book, The Peacemaker. But I do want to say for now, connecting is where I believe we really kickstart the transformation. Why do I say that's where we kickstart the transformation? Because that is where you will be in conversation with others in the church family in small groups and really talking about how things are and how things need to be. And I do encourage you, as you sign up for those small groups, of course you're going to be looking for what's the day and time that works best for you. But I ask you not to gather together with your buddies or in your little group that you always like to be together with. That's fine that you've got that group, and I don't mind you having that. You're going to have it anyway. All I'm asking is, in these groups, try to mix it up. Get together with some people you don't know and get to know them and listen to them, and whether you agree or disagree or understand or don't understand, mix it up and get to know one another better. The third area is, of course, the missional area, developing an agreed upon vision, which, as you heard, I'm already talked about, and understanding where we're going, which is the vision. And then the structural area of peace, developing an effective governance and decision making. I'll be doing a series probably after the Connecting one, and then Easter series. Then we'll probably do our series called How We Do Church. So in the discernment time is when we set up the transition team. We'll begin to set it up before then, but it'll come into real action then. And that's a team comprised of 2 of the elders, or 3, depending on the size of the elders, and 8 from the congregation, plus myself. I'll just serve as the facilitator or the chair, who will not vote or decide. And that team will be made up of a variety of people from different backgrounds, different length of time here at Hazel Glen, proportionately with each of the sexes, and we're looking for a wide scope of perspectives to see things from different vantage points. And again, as they focus first on the mission, vision, and values, then they're beginning that work that will lead to the preparation for the new pastor, of searching for the new pastor. So the mandate of that team is, first of all, as you see there, to clarify the mission, vision, and values, such that they are agreed upon and accepted and form the basis of decisions. So those should be known, understood by everyone in the church. That there should be no misunderstanding about why you exist, where you're going, and what's really important to you. And it's usually churches say to me, well, we don't have a vision. I go, no, you probably have two or three. And that's usually, if not always, the case. And I won't say any more about that right now. The second part is to reflect on the systems and structures. So again, that's where I've just addressed it, but we'll get even more specific with those areas. And then finally, to recommend what aspects of change need to happen before you hire a new pastor, and then what aspects of change you want to bring that new pastor in to work with you on. So they feed their work to the elders. And again, it's up to the elders to accept it. There will already be elders on that committee, but it's up to the others to accept it and to make sure the church family understands what that work is and how that's transforming Hazel Glen Alliance. Then we come into the fourth phase, which is the phase of decisions. So here is where the elders are making those decisions. They're agreeing or working with the transition team to make sure that there's agreement on those things. They approve those things. They will also be the ones that approve the pastoral profile and the position description that the transition team puts together. So the transition team is delegated that work. They do the work. They hand it over to the elders. The elders approve it. The elders make the church family aware of it. So everybody is on board with that. So that when you do hire a pastor, you know what it is you're looking for, what you want that person to be and to do. The transition team will continue to work during this phase of decisions because they're working on the systems, the discipleship, and other areas like that, which again will lead to further decisions with the elders. But this is the time that the pastoral search committee kicks into gear. So again, that's down the road. That we will definitely be starting to look at who will be on it, and it will be comprised of 6 members of Hazel Glen Alliance Church, plus myself again as the facilitator and chair. Again, 2 elders, so we divide the elders. We have different elders, some elders on the transition team, some elders on the search committee. No elder serves on both. It's too much work. They need to separate there. Plus here we include 4 members that the board approves. They need to be members in this case. It's up to the elders whether you want all members on the transition team, because sometimes you have some very new people who aren't yet members, but you still want to hear their voice. But again, that's the elders' decision. But here, I strongly recommend that those on the search committee are all members in good standing, with excellent abilities in discernment, that they are very highly trusted by the church family, and that they are capable of handling the process of searching, interviewing, and deciding. That can be time-consuming and difficult work. I've just come through a church doing that, and it's always more work than they realize, but when it reaches its fruitfulness, it's so worth it. So we will also, alongside the search committee, set up a prayer support team. And that prayer support team functions to bathe the search committee in prayer. Normally what they do is meet at the same times and pray for that committee during that period as well. So we will be doing that. And again, that is totally a volunteer situation. We won't assign that task. We'll invite those to join in and be on that team. So, and we will again make sure that everybody is praying for using the the profile and the position description. And really, that just brings us to the final phase, which is our direction forward, the last D. Oh, there's our search committee. And now we need to get to the last phase, which is our direction forward. There we are. And the direction forward is when you hire the new pastor, the pastor that fits with the mission and the vision and the values and the systems. And that's where you transition to that new pastor. I work with the church to have a smooth transition in bringing that new person on board. And when that person is brought on board, then I can transition out. And that's when we can have a big party and celebration. Actually, I wasn't able to do that in the last church simply because of this whole COVID thing, but they still did a lovely farewell, and it was so nice and so affirming. So it's a good thing. So that's the purpose and the process of transition. And I hope I've tried to just give you the highlights and skim along the surface. Of course, there's lots of, we could dive down deep in any one of those areas, but that's not for you to do right now. But if you are part of the transition team or the search committee or the prayer support team or any other place functioning within the church, you'll be part of this process in some way, shape, or form. So I do want to say now that let's go to that question and answer slide. We're going to follow up as I bring this to a conclusion with an online Zoom call. So if you don't have that link, I hope that it got sent out this week. But if it isn't, if you can't find it, my email is bfreynolds21@gmail.com. So I'm going to be at home after this. I'm going to go home and I'm going to field those calls. And so I encourage you to sign on for that. But again, if you can't find a way to sign on, I'll send you a link and then you just sign on to that. I sometimes give you possible frequently asked questions, maybe just kind of stir the pot. Questions that always come up. Why does this take so long? I'm always answering that question, especially when people, are very sincere and saying, this is taking so long. And I go, well, length of time is relative. I'm sure you understand that after hearing our story of Noah, or if you think about Moses, we're looking at Moses. We looked at Moses this morning, and 40 years in the working with sheep, and then 40 years in the wilderness, and so I mean, how long is a relative term. We certainly don't want to drag something out, but we can't move any faster than God's leading or than you're deciding. So, but what I do want to stress, excuse me, is you may say, well, how will we be informed? We will try to keep you as informed as possible. That's my responsibility, is to guide the process and to keep you informed. But you can always ask. It's never wrong to ask. Just be patient with us, but if you do want to understand, please don't be afraid to ask. And one other frequently asked question is, what would Brian like for his birthday? No, that's not. I don't. Just disregard that. That's on the wrong sheet there. But I just want to close by saying the analogies I like to use for a transition. I've already set us up with the pilgrimage, the idea that we're on pilgrimage with God. And I know some of you have really related to that we're on a journey, we're on a pilgrimage with God, and that's exciting. Some of you have really resonated with that. I've just brought up the whole idea of mountain climbing, again, saying that I'm not a mountain climber, but I sometimes think of the analogy of mountain climbing, and that we start at base camp and make sure we're ready to go up, but then we need to break camp and start moving. And that's really what I think the Connecting series is where we break camp and really get moving. And I hope you begin to see it that way as well. The other analogy that I find helpful, again, just for me, is shooting the rapids. And again, I'm not a swimmer, so I'm just not an outdoorsy guy. But I do love those kind of pictures, and I think about going down the rapids or going down the river, and you've got to watch out for the rapids, you've got to watch out for the rocks, but you want to come to that calm, cool place of relief. But there are times in a transition when we're on the rocks. There are times when the rapids are swirling around us. And I just remind you that transitions can be chaotic times. They can be confusing times in that neutral zone. So please don't be surprised. Expect that. Expect it to be like that. But as we get to where God wants to take us, I believe there will be sweet relief. So I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation, and look forward to seeing some of you on the Zoom call. And I'd just like to close us in prayer. And so, Father, it's been good to walk through this seminar and to clarify what it means to go on a transition. And so, Lord, it's once again easy to talk about and a lot more work to do. So please give us your grace and your power, your wisdom and your sensitivity. Help us to treat one another with grace and love and kindness. Help us to love one another, because that's the mark of your disciples. And Lord, lead us on this transition, because you are our leader. As we pray in Jesus' holy and precious name, amen. We'll see you on the Zoom call.